Edward Hopper painted this in 1914. He showed it once in 1915. Then he rolled it up, hid it in his studio, and never mentioned it again for 50 years. It wasn't found until after he died. This is Soir Bleu, the painting Hopper tried to erase from his own career. The canvas measures 3 feet by 6 feet. It's one of the largest paintings Hopper ever made. In 1914, he was 32 years old and desperate. He worked as a commercial illustrator, drawing advertisements, which he hated. He wanted to be taken seriously as a fine artist. This painting was his gamble, his attempt to prove he could rival the great French masters like Manet or Degas. He exhibited it once at the MacDowell Club in New York in 1915. The reaction was silence, confusion, dismissal. Critics found it too French, too theatrical, too melodramatic. They wanted American scenes, farms, cities, rugged landscapes. This felt like a bad imitation of a Parisian party. Hopper's response was complete. He took the canvas down, rolled it up, and stored it in his studio. He never showed it publicly again. For the next 50 years, while he became famous for stark diners and empty rooms, this painting sat hidden. It was only rediscovered in 1967 when Hopper died and his estate went to the Whitney Museum. The question is, what made this work so wrong that even Hopper wanted it gone? 6 figures sit at a café terrace. They're close enough to touch. Their eyes reveal the problem. The clown at the center stares down at nothing. The woman in the yellow dress looks out past the frame. The bearded man in shadows watches her. The couple on the right looks at each other, or at nothing. Not one pair of eyes meets another. This isn't accidental composition. This is a systematic disconnection. Every figure occupies the same physical space, but exists in a separate psychological reality. The painting depicts crowded loneliness, the specific kind of isolation that happens in public, when you're surrounded by people but utterly unable to connect. That's what feels wrong. Not what's happening in the scene, but what's not happening. No one acknowledges anyone else. They share a table and remain strangers. At the center stands a man in a pristine white clown suit, a Pierrot costume from French pantomime. His face is painted, red lip color, red stripes around his eyes. He wears the full uniform of performance. But he's smoking a cigarette, and the gesture changes everything. Clowns don't smoke in character. They entertain, they gesture, they mime. They don't sit at cafe tables looking exhausted. This figure is off the clock. The costume remains, but the performance has stopped. The Pierrot was a stock character in French theater, the sad clown, the suffering artist who must entertain others while crying inside. Hopper, a depressive introvert forced to work in commercial illustration, likely painted himself into this figure. The clown represents the exhaustion of social performance. The moment when you're too tired to keep pretending, but you're still in public, still in the outfit, still expected to play the role. His gaze is downcast. He's not looking at the party. He's not looking at anything. He's simply present, which is different from participating. On the left stands a woman in a low-cut yellow dress. Her cheeks are painted with aggressive red circles, 2 bright spots of artificial color on otherwise pale skin. To a modern viewer, this reads as theatrical makeup. To a 1915 audience, it was a billboard. Those red circles were a visual code. Respectable women didn't wear obvious paint. Heavy makeup in public signaled prostitution. She's the only figure standing while the others sit. This positions her as a display, an object arranged for viewing rather than a participant in the gathering. Her expression is vacant. She's on the market, but no transaction is occurring. She exists as a commodity that no one wants badly enough to acknowledge. Behind her, half in shadow, sits a bearded man in a dark cap. In Hopper's preparatory sketches for this painting, he labeled this figure explicitly, un maquereau. French slang, it means pimp. That label recontextualizes everything. The woman isn't just wearing heavy makeup, she's working. The man isn't just sitting nearby, he's managing inventory. The left side of the painting is structured around an economic transaction that everyone pretends isn't happening. On the far right sit a man and a woman in expensive evening wear. They're dressed for theater, for opera, for high society. They occupy the same café table as the clown, the pimp, and the prostitute. Yet they remain psychologically absent from the scene unfolding around them. This was common behavior in Belle Époque Paris. Wealthy bourgeois would slum it in working-class cafes, treating the experience as entertainment. The poor became background scenery, part of the authentic atmosphere, like the lanterns or the chairs, visible but not acknowledged. The couple represents class tourism. They're physically present in the same space as the underclass, but they exist in a different dimension. Their gaze doesn't land on the prostitute or the clown. This is how class segregation operates in shared public space, through strategic ignorance. The painting places them all at one table and refuses to let anyone pretend the separation isn't deliberate. The full composition reveals its construction. Japanese paper lanterns hang from above, round glowing orbs suspended in the upper frame. They're decorative, festive, the kind of lighting meant to create atmosphere rather than illuminate clearly. The light they cast is diffuse, soft, inadequate for seeing details, but perfect for mood. Below them, the background is a flat, undifferentiated wash of blue paint. It doesn't graduate into darker tones at the top or lighter tones near the horizon the way real sky does at dusk. It doesn't have clouds or depth or atmospheric perspective. It's monochrome, uniform, artificial. Real outdoor evening light has variation: amber near the horizon, deepening blue overhead, perhaps the last traces of sunset. This has none of that. It looks exactly like what it is: a painted theater backdrop, a flat surface hung behind the actors. The lanterns and the backdrop together create a stage set, not a location. Hopper is signaling that this isn't a real cafe observed from life. This is a constructed psychological space. These aren't portraits of actual people. They're archetypes: the clown, the pimp, the prostitute, the bourgeois couple. Stock characters from theater and social commentary, arranged deliberately to represent types rather than individuals. The title reinforces this: Soir Bleu, Blue Evening. Not 6 o'clock or twilight or dusk, not a specific time you could point to on a clock. The blue hour of the soul. Emotional evening, the color of melancholy, of transition, of the space between day and night when things become uncertain. The painting depicts an internal state, not an external location. Hopper constructed this scene from memory. He had visited Paris and loved French café culture, the outdoor terraces, the theater tradition, the pantomime performances, the social mixing of classes in public spaces. But by 1914, he was back in New York, working in commercial illustration, failing to sell his fine art. He was depressive, introverted, trapped in work he hated, while the career he wanted remained out of reach. This painting is a fantasy built from nostalgia and filtered through depression. It's not what Paris looked like. It's what isolation felt like when Hopper was there. The experience of being surrounded by a vibrant social world and remaining utterly separate from it. An American in Paris, an artist in a world of commerce, an observer who couldn't participate. The artificiality isn't a flaw, it's the method. He's not painting what he saw, he's painting what he feels while seeing it. The stage set construction is honest in a way that realism wouldn't be. It admits the scene is internal, psychological, constructed from fragments of memory and shaped by mood. The fake backdrop tells the truth. This is how loneliness looks from the inside. 1915 was a catastrophic year. In Europe, World War I had begun. The hedonistic Belle Époque, the era of Parisian cafés and decadent leisure, was collapsing into industrial slaughter. In America, being too obsessed with French culture suddenly felt tone-deaf, effete, un-American. The art world was in crisis. The Ashcan school, gritty urban realism, American subjects, was fighting for dominance against European modernism. Hopper was caught in the middle. He loved French culture, but needed American acceptance. Soir Bleu was his attempt to synthesize both. It failed. Critics saw the figures and called them caricatures. The clown, the pimp, the prostitute. They looked like cartoons, not real people. The stylized, theatrical quality that Hopper intended as symbolic felt melodramatic to critics who wanted either American realism or European formal experimentation. The painting satisfied neither camp. The critics were right about what they saw. They were wrong about what it meant. Hopper intended archetypes. He was painting psychological types, symbolic figures arranged on a stage, but the audience read stylization as a technical failure. The sad clown trope didn't help. By 1915, the suffering Pierrot was already becoming a cliché. Hopper played it so earnestly that it felt overwrought to the cynical New York critics who wanted irony, not sincerity. The rejection was total. No sales, no praise, just polite silence and private dismissal. Hopper internalized it as proof he'd been wrong. He rolled the canvas up, he stored it in his studio, and he pivoted completely. He stopped painting fantasy scenes. He stopped painting French cafes and theatrical figures. He committed to stark American realism. Empty rooms, lonely diners, harsh architectural light. Soir Bleu was the sacrificial lamb. It had to die so nighthawks could be born. After Hopper died in 1967, the Whitney Museum found the painting in his studio bequest. Modern art historians call it the Rosetta Stone of his psychology. The work critics dismissed as a failure is now understood as his most revealing piece. The elements that caused the rejection are exactly what make it compelling now. The flat artificial background, the archetypal figures, the uncomfortable social dynamics. These aren't flaws, they're the thesis. Hopper was ahead of the audience. He painted psychological space in 1914, but viewers wouldn't understand that visual language for decades. We no longer care if it looks too French. We appreciate the surreal, dreamlike quality. The wrongness that 1915 critics hated is the point. The painting depicts a pattern we all recognize, being surrounded by people while remaining utterly alone. This is the same isolation Hopper would spend 50 years refining. It's in Nighthawks, the diner where no one speaks. It's in Morning Sun, the woman, alone in a bright room. It's in Office at Night, two people in the same space, emotionally unreachable. But here, in 1914, he painted it first, before he learned to make it acceptable, before he learned to make it American, before he learned to hide the clown costume and just show the loneliness. The painting Hopper buried contains the seed of everything he became famous for. The failure holds the truth. The successful works learned to soften. The bourgeois couple remains the key. They sit at the table with the clown and the pimp and the prostitute, and they see nothing. They represent the audience position, physically present, emotionally absent. We occupy shared spaces with suffering and practice the same strategic blindness. We look without seeing. The wrongness you feel looking at this painting isn't a mistake in the composition. It's the recognition of a social pattern made visible. Hopper painted the architecture of disconnection, the specific ways people occupy shared space while remaining psychologically separate. The clown is still there, off the clock, smoking his cigarette. The performance is over, but the costume remains, and no one at the table is looking at him. They never were.